Hey, good day, good day, good day, everybody. Hey, happy holiday. Let's get straight to it. Today is what? December 25th, 2024. You know what? Fat Cat Lorenzo Nichols' birthday. This man right now has spent the last 39 years of his life incarcerated. He spent more time in prison than he actually spent on the street. So when you sit back and you think about it, was it worth it? It doesn't matter how much money that he made. They said at one point in time he made $20 million a year. But was it worth you spending 39 years of incarcerated? I don't think so. So right now, like I said, what I want you to do is right now is listen to this piece and listen to the words that come out of this person's mouth. And always remember, crime doesn't pay. There's no shortcut in life. Only thing come fast is trouble. Easy to get into, hard to get out. Hit the like button, subscribe, share, support. I am the real Brian Glaze Gibbs. If I can change, anybody can change. Could change come from within. Peace.
This is the story of ex-New York drug kingpin Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols. Born on December 25th, 1958 in Birmingham, Alabama. Fat Cat is widely known as an ex-Jamaica Queens drug kingpin who people say was the biggest drug kingpin in New York or probably the whole East Coast during the 1980s. According to the streets, Fat Cat is an ex-Jamaica Queens drug kingpin who ran a sophisticated drug trafficking operation that made him about $20 million per year. But as for the story of Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols, it starts off in Jamaica Queens, New York, where he was raised. According to reports, during Fat Cat's younger years, he was raised by his grandmother in Birmingham, Alabama, until he reached the age of 10 years old, where he was sent to Queens, New York to stay with his mother Louisa and her husband in the Ozone Park neighborhood. It is said after living in Queens for about 4 years, Fat Cat decided to drop out of school in the 9th grade where he would turn his attention towards the streets and start hanging out with a dangerous crew of friends who was connected to a street gang known as the Seven Crowns. It is said in 1976, while he was now a member of the Seven Crown street gang, he would have his first run-in with the law when he was arrested for 2 robberies in New York that led to him being convicted and sentenced to 18 years in prison. According to reports, by 1980, after only serving 2.5 years out of his 18-year sentence, Fat Cat will be released from prison and turn his attention to a more lucrative way to make money, and that way will be becoming a drug kingpin. It is said Fat Cat was able to do this because during his 2.5 years in prison, he would meet a connection who had ties to the Italian mafia who controlled all of New York's criminal underworld during the 1980s. It is said after meeting his mafia connection, Fat Cat will begin establishing his drug operation by building a network of drug dealers he supplied with drugs who will often work 15-hour shifts selling drugs in the streets and also housing projects around Southeast Queens. It is also said during this time in his life as a drug kingpin, he will begin supplying other big-time drug dealing crews such as the Supreme team that was ran by a man named Kenneth Supreme McGriff, the Bebos, who was ran by a man named Howard Pappy Mason, who would eventually become Fat Cat's enforcement crew in his drug trafficking organization. According to reports, it is said once Fat Cat was able to establish his $20 million a year drug operation, he will run his operation out of Big Mac's Deli, a business him and his wife Joanna took over after her father. And according to reports, on July 29th, 1985, Fat Cat will run into some trouble when police raided his base of operations, Big Mac's Deli, and found $180,000 in cash and large amounts of heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. It is said from this raid on his deli, Fat Cat will be charged with gun and drug possession, but he will later be released from jail after posting bond. But it is said shortly after being released from jail on bond, his parole officer, a man named Brian Rooney, would rearrest him for violating his parole. According to reports, after being mad, his parole officer rearrested him and put him back in jail. Fat Cat will order some of his enforcers to beat up his parole officer, Brian Rooney, but it is said instead of beating up his parole officer, Brian Rooney would be shot and killed on October 10th, 1985, when a gunman pulled next to his car on 119th Street and opened fire on him as he sat in his car. It is said from this shooting, Brian Rooney will be shot in his head, back, and his left arm. This is part 1 of the Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols story. Part 2 coming soon. Ex-New York drug kingpin Lorenzo Fat Cat Nichols Part 2. According to reports, It is said once Fat Cat was back behind bars for his parole violation, he would continue running his drug operation through his mom, his sisters, trusted associates named Joseph Mike Bones Rogers, Brian Glaze Gibbs, and also his top enforcer, Pappy Mason. According to reports, federal agents also believe while Fat Cat was now in prison for his parole violation, a series of murders would take place that federal agents believe Fat Cat ordered while he was in prison. According to reports, in 1986, it is believed Fat Cat will order the murder of a man named Isaac Bowden after Isaac and some of his associates robbed Fat Cat's girlfriend, Carolyn Tyson. According to reports, a year after the murder of Isaac Bowden, federal agents believe Fat Cat ordered the murder of his child's mother, Maisha Horsham, after Fat Cat found out Maisha stole some money from him and spent some of it on somebody else. It is said on December 17, 1987, Maisha and a friend would be shot multiple times by members of Fat Cat's organization. It is said from this attack, Maisha would die from her injuries, but her friend would survive. It is also said during this shooting, Fat Cat's son TC was present during the shooting, but he wasn't harmed. But it is said after the killing of Maisha, members of Fat Cat's organization would take his son TC and drop him off in his grandmother's yard. According to reports, in May of 1987, 7 months before ordering the murder of Maisha, Fat Cat's wife would be kidnapped and held for ransom, but soon after paying the ransom, his wife will be released and the kidnappers would eventually get arrested. According to reports, in 1988, this would be the year Fat Cat's reign as the biggest drug kingpin in Queens would come to an end. When in January of 1988, Fat Cat will be found guilty and sentenced to 25 years to life for the guns and drugs police found during the raid of Big Mac's Deli. It is also said that same year in 1988, Fat Cat would lose his disabled sister Mary to a fire when one of his rivals firebombed his mother's house, which caused the death of his sister Mary. According to reports, in 1988, the biggest thing that sealed Fat Cat's fate as a drug kingpin was the February 26, 1988 murder of police officer Edward Byrne, who was shot 5 times in the head while he was on duty outside of a Guyanese immigrant's house, whose house had been firebombed twice, for calling the police to report criminal activities going on in the street. According to reports, with the murder of police officer Edward Byrne, the feds would apply pressure to dismantle Fat Cat's drug operation by bringing down everybody that was involved. According to reports, the murder of Edward Byrne became so widely publicized, Vice President George Bush would carry his badge during his 1988 presidential campaign. According to reports, in 1992, Fat Cat would be sentenced to 40 years in federal prison after he decided to cooperate with the feds against Pappy Mason, who he claims ordered the murder of Edward Byrne by himself and he didn't have anything to do with it. It is also said after Fat Cat was sentenced to 40 years in prison, he would take responsibility for ordering the murders of his child's mother Maisha, his parole officer Brian Rooney, and also Isaac Bowden. According to reports, Fat Cat was released from federal prison on March 16, 2023, after his judge decided to let him out on compassionate release, but it is said soon after getting out of federal prison, Florida prison officials came to pick him up so he can start his 10-year prison sentence in Florida after he was found guilty for his involvement in a stolen car ring with Detroit legend White Boy Rick. But as for Fat Cat today, he is currently serving his time at Jefferson Correctional Institute in Florida, and his release date is December 29th, 2032. Thank y'all for watching my video, and God bless.